Hello and welcome today to our lesson on mitosis. Okay, so let's take a look at our this chart right here. I like this one. This is the cell cycle, the whole thing. So here's our process of mitosis as one part of the cell cycle, and then we have interphase, and interphase is made up of G1, the synthesis, the S phase, and the G2 phase. We're going to get into more detail with that coming up, but let's take a look now at mitosis. All right, so how do little elephants grow up to be big elephants? How do they get to be big? Through the process of, you guessed it, mitosis. And why do animals shed their skin? Well, they're getting bigger, so they need to shed their skin. And so because of that, and how that all happens is through mitosis. Okay, so this part right here, the process of asexual reproduction begins after a sperm fertilizes an egg. And notice it says here the asexual reproduction. So this process of asexual reproduction, obviously the sperm and the egg, that is sexual reproduction. And then afterwards, this rapidly dividing of the cells to create the organs and all the continued new cells that go on in the body all occur because of asexual reproduction. All right, so why do cells reproduce? Well, we got to have growth. We got to have, whoops, I did something. There we go. Let's go back to here. Okay, so there's got to be growth. You can't just stay a baby forever. And we got to repair things. There's damage to the skin, damage to the organs, things that need to be repaired, and things that have to be replaced. And notice down here it talks about skin cancer. Skin cancer is that abnormal growth of skin cells. And so it often develops on skin that's exposed to the sun. And we're going to take a look at cancer in a little more detail, but that's what cancer is. When it talks about a tumor, it's these cells that continue to grow, and the mechanism that tells them to stop growing is not working. So the cell that reproduce by asexual reproduction reproduce constantly. Alrighty, so let's look at, again, here's our chart. So we're looking at, here's mitosis right here, and we'll look at those phases of mitosis, but you can see mitosis right in here, and then this process of cytokinesis comes right afterwards. And then the whole rest of the cell cycle is this interphase, again, made up of G1, S, and G2. Oops. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so this mitosis cycle. All right, so you need to know all of these. The cell cycle is interphase. So that's that largest part. Interphase takes up the most time. And then you have your prophase, and then your metaphase, your anaphase, and then telophase and cytokinesis. So you can see each of these phases as you go along. So you have your interphase, and then your prophase and your metaphase. Metaphase here, you can see these, well, we'll get into detail with that with each of the phases. I'm trying to jump ahead of myself here. So let's take a look at, let's see if it'll let me click on this. All right, so this brings us out to this website. So here is an interactive, okay, well, let's just get rid of that belly fat. And so, all right, I'm not sure why that's going on there. All right, so this process, okay, so if we click play, you can see all the phases over here: interphase, prophase, prometaphase, which is just the beginning of metaphase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, cytokinesis, and then back into interphase. So we're going to do this quickly, and you're going to see going through here. There it is, through each one of those phases. That is cell reproduction. So again, let's go through. So we start at interphase, and you can see you have this chromatin, you have these centrioles that are out there, spindle fibers, here's the nucleus, and then we go through prophase, And you can see how these spindle fibers are forming here at these centrioles here. And in the nucleus, we've gone from chromatin to chromosome. So this has become, the genetic materials become tightly coiled. And these little dots here are called centromeres. All right, then we go to metaphase. Metaphase is where the chromosomes will line up. Here's our centrioles at each of the ends, each of the poles. Spindle fibers coming out, attaching to those centromeres. And so they line up here at the center. Anaphase, we're going to see those chromosomes are being pulled over to the centrioles. So they're being pulled to the poles. In telophase, here they're almost there. You can see this cell is starting to pinch here in the middle, because then it's cytokinesis. That cell is going to split in two, and we're going to have two exact copies of what we started with. And then we go back through interphase. All right, so let's go back to our slideshow. All right, so here we are at interphase. And this process occurs before mitosis begins. So we're in interphase before mitosis begins, and you can see the chromosomes are copied here. The chromosomes look like spaghetti. Remember, they look like thread-like coils, and that's called chromatin. And that's where they look at the start. But then each chromosome and its copy, its sister chromosome, change to sister chromatids at the end of this phase. All right, so interphase, they used to think there wasn't a whole lot going on, but now they know that to be a different case. Okay, so here's a picture of what an animal cell looks like in interphase. And again, you can tell the difference there between the animal and the plant cell, because the plant cell has more of this rectangular structure, and the animal cell has more of that not rectangular structure, and you have the cell wall here on the plant cell. But here's what interphase looks like. You can identify both of those in the process of interphase. All right, so let's take a look at prophase. Prophase is the first step in mitosis. And so there's 4 phases: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. I like to say PMAT. It just helps me to remember the stages of mitosis. So in prophase, you can see what's happening here. This is where mitosis begins. The cell begins to divide at this point. So these centrioles right here, you can see these centrioles right over here, and those appear, and they begin to move to the opposite ends. So they're going to move to what we call the poles. They're going to move to the ends there. And then these spindle fibers here are going to form between those poles. That's what's happening in the process of prophase. All right, things are starting to organize a little bit. Here's what it looks like when you can see it in the animal cell and the plant cell. Now you can actually look, and you can see these centrioles here, and you can see these pieces, these spindle fibers, and you can see the chromosomes in prophase. All right, metaphase is our next one. In metaphase, we have chromatids. These are pairs of chromosomes. So now we have these chromatids. You can see those in the little X's. Those are the chromosomes. And they attach, again, this is that little dot there in the middle. That's called a centromere. And that centromere, let's see if I can spell that, and it could look okay. I don't know if that looks okay. There we go, centromere. So that's in the center. That's where the spindle fiber is attached to. All right, next we have, and here's our actual photograph of that. Metaphase is very easy to see, because those chromosomes line up there in the center of the cell, and you can see the spindle fibers attached to the centrioles. The third step in mitosis, you have your chromatids will actually separate. So they're pulled to the sides here. You can see them getting pulled apart, and they're getting pulled over here to these centrioles. So these chromatids here in the middle, or the pair of chromosomes, they're pulled out to the centrioles with the spindle fibers attached there to the centromere. And then we move on over to the picture of what that looks like. And again, easy to detect because you got these chromosomes here, these chromatids that are pulled now to the end. So they're like bunched up there at the poles, at the centrioles. All right. And then the last phase of mitosis is telophase. And telophase is the fourth step, and this is where you have two new nuclei that are formed. They're copies of the original. And your chromosomes appear as chromatin. So now we're back to chromatin. Looks like spaghetti. So the chromosomes don't look like the X anymore with that centromere in the middle. They are now more squiggly, and they look like threads instead of these rods. And this is where mitosis ends. All right, so we move from mitosis, and here's what it looks like. You can see this, how the cell is now, the cell wall or the cell membrane there is pinching into the center there. All right, and then we move into cytokinesis. So don't be confused. There's mitosis, which is prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. So 4 steps in mitosis. And then we move into cytokinesis. This is where you actually have this splitting of these two cells. So in telophase, everything's getting pulled to the sides. But in cytokinesis, now we have two what are called daughter cells. So we had our original, and now we have 2 exact copies of that, and those are considered daughter cells. They each have their own nucleus, and with those identical chromosomes in there. All right. This is a great slide. You want to get very familiar with this one because you certainly may see pictures, and you have to identify which phase of mitosis it is in. And same thing, here's the plant cell, what they look like in there. Okay, here's another, this is a good picture of the cell cycle. So again, we have our interphase, and then we move into mitosis. So we have prophase, and then lining up there in the middle here is metaphase, anaphase, we're getting pulled out to the poles here, and then telophase. You have chromatin here instead of chromosomes, and you can see that cell membrane starting to pinch there. Cytokinesis, we're now out of mitosis, and we're into cytokinesis. Cytokinesis, we have 2 daughter cells here, exact copies of what we start with, and then we roll back into cytokinesis. So now into interphase. So each one of these at cytokinesis is now going to, each one of these daughter cells is now going to go through interphase. Okay. And that would be a good one for you to practice on. And that's all we have for today on mitosis. So that is the cell cycle. That's the process of mitosis, and we'll look at more of that in class. Have a wonderful day.